this is exactly why I wrote Feeding You Lies, which is all about the food industry's playbook. And they use those tactics of using experts to advance their agenda. They go and they pay Harvard scientists to tell people that they don't exercise enough and that the sugary soda that they're drinking is not responsible for their obesity and their heart disease. And, this is the kind of sneaky things that they're doing behind the scenes by trying to take the onus off of the food industry and more on the individual person. And so they do all of these things like create studies where, the Candy Manufacturers Association had a study out, or that they paid for the study. They were the people who funded it behind the scenes. And the headline was that kids don't get fat who eat candy, right? And even though that's totally absurd, right? It's a completely absurd notion to know that if you eat candy, you don't get fat. However, what it does is it creates confusion in the mother's mind. The person that's at the checkout and their kids, being bombarded by all the candy at their eye level, and they're wanting to throw those Skittles into the grocery cart. And that mom maybe have seen that headline on CNN or in their newspaper or wherever and was like, it's not so bad. It's fine. You can just eat it. Right. And it's to create that, that confusion so that that mother just doesn't feel so bad about her choices. And so all of these kind of things are happening. And that's just one example of several examples I share in that book about how the food industry creates a conversation, a dialogue about what we should be eating when we really shouldn't be eating any of that stuff.
Yeah, right.
And it's really up to us to know how to eat. And I think it's very simple when you ask yourself 3 questions. You say, what are the ingredients of what I'm eating? You need to know every ingredient that you're eating. And if you don't know it, you need to go find out what that ingredient is. If you're eating a piece of bread and it has monodiglycerides in it, and you're like, what the crap is that? Yep. Find out what that is. Well, you know what it is? Well, the food industry invented it after trans fats were removed from our diets because it was linked to heart attacks and death. And so they needed to find a different way to preserve products that break down. It's a preservative and it has minute amounts of trans fat still in it. And it's like, oh, well, shit, do I want to eat that? And so you've got to ask yourself that every time. And then the second question you want to ask yourself is it nutritious? And you don't need to be a nutritionist or a registered dietitian to understand whether something's nutritious. You can use your own intuition to figure that out. Is it an apple or is it like a Snickers bar that's processed and sitting on that shelf for 9 months, right? And then the third question is simple, where do the ingredients come from, right? Are they coming from, sourcing, going back to your thoughts about sourcing, are they coming from a factory farm? Are they coming from a conventional farm that's, being sprayed with Roundup? Are they coming from a factory? And so if you just answer those 3 questions, every time you sit down to eat, you'll automatically start to make better choices because you won't like the answers. I'm positive that most people won't like the answers to those questions if they ask themselves, and they'll be questioning, hey, what am I really eating here?
Yeah.
And that
most of go on.
Sorry.
Ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, it seems like most of the things that will stick around and will maintain truth for a very long time are not very sexy. And so that's the thing. It's things that are backed by a lot of science and have a lot of data, and there's a reason to fund research studies for those things. It's typically because it's developed by some company or corporation that's creating this product, and so they have millions of dollars to invest in promoting it and creating research and perhaps paying people off as well. And it's this whole dirty industry that you're getting involved in. Meanwhile, there is this other much less sexy realm that's like your local farmer's market. Yeah. And there's nobody investing millions of dollars into it. There's nobody running a lot of research, right? Because there's just no money there. And that, I think, generally, consistently across the board, it would, behoove most biological organisms to stay in that space. Mm-hmm. But I wonder, where is technology valuable with the nutritional conversation? Because I think it'd be easy just to romanticize, and that could be in a general absolute way correct, just like stay with the regenerative farms and the farmers market and stay close to the ground and local and all of that. I think that you could probably just live that way, and that would you'd probably actually be quite good without any of this extended conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But where does science and technology actually benefit us?
So this is a great question. So I love this question because, one of the things that I did as I became a mother is I realized that my drive to be an activist somehow got a little bit softened because I put myself in less risky situations. I mean, people were trying to take me down. I mean, driving by my house, rape threats, death threats, all kinds of stuff was happening to me before I kind of took a break from taking on the industry full on.
And you're electing to enter into that kind of shadowy world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're not going to get that in the mom and pop local farm. Just like, eat more bananas. Like you're not going to get it.
No.
But if you go into that world, you're like, oh, this is the shadow.
Yeah.
This is what we're in. We're in it.
And I mean, you got to imagine what kind of money situation was happening when like a giant who is like the number one fast food at the time, Subway, had to completely re-engineer their bread without chemicals because of a petition that was started that, had over 50,000 signatures and went worldwide viral.
Can you explain that?
Yeah,
because it's very
absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah. Hold on one second.
Yeah. The yoga mat air bubble bread situation.
One of the things that I just found so disheartening when I started to investigate my food was these marketing messages that the fast food industry was using that were completely untrue. And one of those fast food giants was Subway. Subway was using the term eat fresh. Like every single time you would think of Subway, you were eating fresh. And when I looked at the ingredients in a Subway sandwich, I couldn't believe the chemicals that I found. I mean, the bread itself had close to 50 different ingredients, chemicals I couldn't pronounce. I didn't know what they were. I had to look up every single one of them and figure out what was going on there. One of the chemicals I found was azodicarbonamide. It's the same chemical they use in yoga mats and shoe rubber. So when you turn a yoga mat sideways and you see those evenly dispersed air bubbles, that is what azodicarbonamide does in a yoga mat, but it also does it in bread. So the bread becomes very uniform. So they wanted their bread to look and taste the same across the board after every chain, in America. Well, I found out that they weren't using this chemical, azodicarbonamide, overseas. They were not using it in the Subway bread in Europe. They were not using the Subway bread in Singapore. And in Singapore, if you got caught using this chemical in your food, azodicarbonamide, you would get fined $450,000 and put in jail for 15 years.
Wow.
So I was like, whoa. What is this chemical exactly? So I looked.
It's like a subtle form of assault.
Yeah. And it definitely is. And so what happens is when it's heated, it turns into semicarbazide. So it actually turns into a carcinogen. But then also the factory workers that use this chemical have all sorts of lung issues. And that's why they've prohibited it overseas. Well, I'm like, okay, this is another example of how hypocritical our American food system is, that Subway has figured out how to make their bread safer and better for people overseas, but not here in the United States. And so I said, this has got to stop. The first thing I did was write a huge investigation on this, called them, emailed them, asked them to change, asked them why they have it here and not elsewhere. They would not answer me, right? And so I was like, okay, something's got to give. Michelle Obama gets on TV, says, I have a partnership with Subway. Subway is good for all kids. We're going to start serving Subway in schools. I said, enough's enough. I've got to do something about this. And so I started a petition to get azodicarbonamide out of Subway bread. It went so viral that the Chinese, I just remember this, the Chinese government was freaking out because they thought they were using azodicarbonamide in China, but they weren't. And so there were the headlines were no azodicarbonamide in Chinese Subway. It was crazy. It was all over the globe. And Subway, by the end of that week, I got an email forwarded to me by someone who works at a Subway chain from the CEO of Subway that they were going to remove azodicarbonamide, which was so cool. But that campaign went so viral that azodicarbonamide went out of business altogether in every single bread manufacturer in America within months.
Wow.
So that chemical, you can only imagine how expensive it is for that company who made that chemical, right? And all of the bread manufacturers had to suddenly figure out, oh, I've got to use something else to create the same look and feel of my product. And so the person, who owns the carbonamide chemical factory hates me, right? Like totally is after me. So like, what are they doing behind the scenes to like get at me, right? And so you can only imagine the amount of money that I was impacting in the food industry. So they were doing whatever they could to get me to just shut up and go away. I mean, they took over my Wikipedia page. They would hire groups of trolls to leave no comment left behind online. And the online space got so crazy and so bad, I had to turn off Google Alerts. I turned it off now over 8 years ago because I didn't want to know what was being said about me online, because it was really starting to affect my work and my mental game, right? And I decided to turn it off. And I just said, I don't care if someone's saying something nice about my work or negative about my work. It doesn't matter. I need to continue doing what I'm doing because it's so important, because I don't want people to feel like I used to feel, dead and zombie-like.